year's 1324. You're in the streets of Cairo, Egypt. It's hot, dusty, just a normal day. You're maybe buying some bread or something, minding your own business. And then the horizon, it just starts to shift.
It just fills up completely.
Right. Out of the desert comes this caravan. Feels like a massive understatement. We were talking about 60,000 people.
Which is basically a medium-sized city on the move. I mean, can you imagine the logistics?
Exactly. You've got soldiers, officials, heralds, just thousands of camels stretching as far as you can see. And then right in the middle, on a gold throne, is Mansa Musa, the king of Mali.
On his pilgrimage to Mecca.
On his pilgrimage. But here's the detail from the accounts that it absolutely blows my mind every single time I read it.
It has to be the inflation.
Inflation. He didn't just bring gold. He brought too much gold. He was just handing out ingots, buying souvenirs at these crazy markups.
He flooded the market so badly, he single-handedly crashed the value of gold in Cairo.
By something like 20%.
It took the Egyptian economy 12 years to recover from that. It is one of the only times in history where one man's vacation caused a decade-long recession.
Because he was too generous. It's a flex that, modern billionaires can only dream of. But here's the thing, and this is why we're here today. It's easy to see Mansa Musa as this singular, dazzling event.
Right, like he was an anomaly. But that's the key. He wasn't. He was a node.
Exactly. He was just one part of this huge, throbbing machine. And that is what we're diving into today. Not just the king of Mali, but the system that made a journey like that even possible.
We're talking about, well, arguably the greatest pre-modern trading bloc in history.
A network that spanned 5,000 miles from Spain all the way to the borders of China.
And the most fascinating part, it wasn't built by an empire. There was no emperor of trade running things. It was built by merchants, by a shared legal code, and by this really powerful concept of trust.
And that's our mission for this deep dive. How did this system work across 5,000 miles without a central government? How do you get goods from Grenada to Guangzhou without FedEx or the WTO?
Well, to understand that, you have to kind of throw out your modern map. You have to visualize the network as it existed back then.
Okay, let's build that map. What are the boundaries?
So start in the west. You've got Al-Andalus, which is modern-day southern Spain, and then the whole strip of North Africa. That's your gateway to the Mediterranean.
Yep.
Then look east. The routes just radiate out, almost like spokes on a giant wheel.
Spokes on a wheel.
Yeah.
So there's a hub. What's the axle?
Baghdad. In the 8th, 9th centuries, under the Abbasids, Baghdad is the center of the world. It is the connector. From there, you have routes shooting north into Central Asia, south to the Persian Gulf, and east all the way to China.
So it's a continuous zone of trade. But you said no emperor was running this.
No. Politically, this whole area was often fractured, different caliphates, sultanates, all fighting each other. But, and this is the key, economically and legally, it was one zone.
A Pax Islamica, like the Pax Romana.
Similar idea, yeah, but broader. It relied on this sort of operating system that everyone agreed to run. And that system had 3 pillars: Sharia law, a very pro-business culture, and a concept called Amana.
Amana. The notes really highlight that. It translates to trust, right?
Strictly, yes. But here it's more like fiduciary responsibility. It's the idea that your word is bound by God. We'll get into how that worked, but just keep that word in mind. Amana is the glue holding this whole map together.
All right, so let's get to the hardware of the system before the software. Mechanism 1, the Silk Road. And I have to admit, I have this very romantic, movie image in my head.
Oh yeah, everyone does.
A caravan loads up in Baghdad, merchant waves goodbye, and he just walks all the way to the Great Wall of China.
And in reality, that merchant would be dead in a week.
That's encouraging.
It's a complete myth. A single caravan trying that whole distance, it's suicide. You're dealing with bandits, deserts, freezing mountains. The Silk Road wasn't a highway, it was a relay race.
So it's a bucket brigade trading.
Precisely. A merchant in Baghdad buys silk from a guy in Samarkand. That guy bought it from someone in Kashgar. The goods changed hands, dozens of times.
Which would explain the economics.
Yeah.
Every time that silk changes hands, someone adds their margin.
Exactly. So by the time a bolt of Chinese silk gets to Damascus, the markup is huge, maybe 40, 50%. But because these were luxury goods, silk, spices, the market could handle it. You wouldn't ship grain this way.
Right. Too heavy, too cheap. You ship things where a small bag costs a fortune. Now, you mentioned bandits. If I'm one of these early merchants, where am I sleeping? I can't be just pitching a tent in the dunes.
No, you would not want to do that. And this is where we see the physical infrastructure of the network. They had the caravanserai.
Caravanserai. Paint us a picture.
Think of it like a cross between a fortified castle and a Holiday Inn. Massive stone structures, built about a day's journey apart, high walls, heavy gates.
So they were defensible.
Very. Inside, you had this huge central courtyard for the animals, and around the edges, rooms for the merchants and warehouses for the goods. But it wasn't just a hotel, it was a market.
Right. Because if I meet a guy coming the other direction, I could just trade with him right there.
Exactly. A lot of business happened inside the walls. And here's the cool part about the system. Many of these weren't even run for profit. They were built by wealthy rulers as an act of charity.
A charitable endowment, a wafuf.
Yes. Offering safe harbor to travelers was seen as a pious act, but it also stimulated trade, which, made the ruler richer in the long run.
But how safe were they, really? What stops the guy running the place from robbing his guests?
Reputation. We're back to Amana. If a caravanserai got a reputation for being unsafe, word traveled faster than the camels. The route would just shift. Caravans would simply bypass you.
So the security wasn't just the walls, it was the economic need for a good reputation.
Exactly. The network basically policed itself.
Okay, so that's the overland route, camels and sand. But the sources say the real highway eventually shifted. We moved from the camel to the ship.
The Silk Road gets all the fame, but the Maritime Highway, the Indian Ocean trade, was the real heavy lifter. It was faster, cheaper, and could move so much more volume.
This is the loop connecting East Africa, the Middle East, India, and all the way to China.
Correct. And the technology driving this wasn't the steam engine, it was the dhow and, well, the wind.
The dhow, that's the ship with the triangular sail, right? The lateen sail.
Yes, and that shape is crucial. It lets you tack to sail closer to the wind, unlike the old square sails. But the real tech was knowing the monsoons.
The seasonal winds.
It's a rhythmic system. In the summer, the wind blows from Africa towards India. In the winter, it reverses. Arab, Indian, and African sailors turned this into a science. You didn't fight the ocean, you just waited for the express train to arrive.
So it's like a scheduled service. You know the train leaves in April?
Exactly. And that created this very specific cultural rhythm. A merchant would sail to, say, Calicut in India, and then he'd be stuck there for months waiting for the winds to shift.
He couldn't just turn around and go home.
Nope. So what does he do? He rents a house, he learns the language, maybe he marries a local woman, he integrates. That's why these port cities became such incredible melting pots. It wasn't just dock, unload, leave.
Where were they moving on these ships?
This is where you get the bulk goods. Timber, ceramics, massive amounts of spices. Spices were the big money, but also technology.
Like the astrolabe?
The astrolabe, the compass, papermaking. The maritime route was a superhighway for innovation.
Okay, we have the hardware, the ships, the caravanserai. We need to talk about the software, the financial layer, because this part of the notes really surprised me. We're talking about checks in the 9th century.
Yeah, it sounds totally anachronistic, right? But they were using something called the suftaja.
Suftaja, how did that work?
It's basically a letter of credit. So let's say you're a merchant in Cairo. You need to buy spices in Baghdad for, 10,000 dinars.
Okay.
Option A. You load 10,000 gold coins onto a camel and walk across a desert full of bandits.
High risk. I prefer keeping my head.
A wise choice.
Mm-hmm.
So option B. You go to a banker in Cairo, you give him the 10,000 dinars, he writes you a suftaja-coded, signed piece of paper, you travel to Baghdad with just that paper, walk into the partner's office, hand it over, and he gives you the cash.
That's a traveler's check. It's basically Western Union without the app.
It is. But think about what that requires. For that piece of paper to be worth gold, the banker in Baghdad has to trust the banker in Cairo completely. They're relying entirely on Amana.
And this is where the religious part comes in. Because there's no SEC, no FBI to investigate fraud.
The regulator was God. In the Islamic world, commerce and faith were deeply connected. I mean, you have to remember, the Prophet Muhammad himself was a merchant.
Which is a huge cultural difference from medieval Europe.
Massive. In Europe, the church often looked down on profit-seeking. The merchant was a necessary evil. In the Islamic world, the honest merchant was a hero. There are sayings that rank the honest merchant right alongside martyrs.
So if I cheat you on this suftaja, I'm not just a bad businessman.
You're a bad Muslim. You're violating a sacred trust. And that social and spiritual pressure was more effective than any credit score could ever be.
I want to see this in action. We have the theory. Let's look at the ultimate user of this network, Ibn Battuta.
Ah, the Prince of Travelers. He's the perfect case study.
Born in Tangier 1304. Leaves home at 21 for a pilgrimage, a bit like Mansa Musa, but he doesn't stop.
He gets the travel bug. He just keeps going for 30 years. North Africa, Persia, India, Southeast Asia, China. He travels way further than Marco Polo.
And the thing that struck me is he travels thousands of miles into totally different cultures, but he never really seems like a stranger.
That's what some call the passport concept. Because he was a Muslim scholar, educated in the law, he could land in a port in India or a city in China and find a community that spoke his language.
Not Arabic necessarily.
No, the language of his values. They prayed the same way, ate the same food, and most importantly, they followed the same commercial and civil law.
So he could just plug into the network.
Literally, he'd walk into a town, go to the mosque, and often get a job. He worked as a judge in the Maldives and in Delhi. Imagine an American lawyer today just walking into a court in Tokyo and starting to preside over cases. It's impossible. But for him, the legal code was fundamentally the same everywhere.
That's mind-blowing. We talk about globalization today like we invented it, but that's a level of integration that's just hard to wrap your head around.
And he wrote it all down in his memoir, The Rila. It's this amazing record of the whole world at that time.
Let's loop back to where we started, to Mansa Musa in Africa. We talked about the gold he brought out. But that trans-Saharan trade route wasn't just a one-way street, was it?
No. Gold went north, but salt went south.
Salt. It sounds so mundane to us. I have a shaker of it in my kitchen that cost $1.
In the heat of the Sahara, salt is life. You die without it. It was so valuable that in some markets, it was traded for its equal weight in gold.
A pound of salt for a pound of gold.
At the extremes, yes. But the most important thing moving on those routes wasn't gold or salt, it was ideas. Specifically, Islam itself.
Right, and this is a crucial point the sources make. We often think of religion spreading by the sword.
And sometimes that happened. But in West Africa and Southeast Asia, Islam wasn't brought by soldiers. It was brought by merchants.
How does that dynamic work? How does a guy selling salt convert a country?
It's about prestige and utility. A trader settles in a town like Timbuktu. He's literate, he has a sophisticated accounting system, he has this legal code that resolves disputes fairly. And the locals look at this and say, I want to be part of that system.
It's an aspirational brand.
Exactly. Converting to Islam gave you entry into the global trading club. You get better credit terms with the guys in Cairo. So the elites converted first and the culture followed.
And that's how Timbuktu becomes this massive intellectual center.
A huge one. Mansa Musa brought back architects and books from his trip. The book trade in Timbuktu rivaled its gold trade. It was integration, not invasion.
So we have this incredible self-sustaining system. It's profitable, widespread, based on trust. It worked for centuries, but we aren't using soutages anymore.
Yeah.
What broke the machine?
The disruptors arrived, and they brought cannons.
The Europeans.
Specifically the maritime powers. The Portuguese, then the Dutch, then the English. The turning point is 1498. Vasco da Gama sails around Africa and reaches India.
And he wasn't looking to join the club, was he?
Not at all. When the Portuguese entered the Indian Ocean, they were shocked. They saw this open, relatively peaceful trade network where ships weren't heavily armed, and they saw an opportunity.
They didn't compete on price, they competed on violence.
Exactly. They set up fortified bases and demanded that merchants buy protection passes. If you didn't buy a pass, they just sank your ship.
So they replaced a system of mutual benefit with a protection racket.
It was the introduction of armed state monopolies into a system of free enterprise. And the old network, based on Amana, just couldn't compete with heavy artillery.
It's a tragic end to the story. But looking back at it all, what's the big takeaway for us today?
I think the takeaway is that trade doesn't require imperialism to work. We often assume that to have global trade, you need a global policeman, a superpower enforcing the rules.
But this system proves that's not true.
Right. For centuries, you had a global economy that functioned on ethics, reputation, and shared law. It proved that you can have efficiency and scale without a central superpower forcing everyone to play nice.
It effectively ran on honor.
It ran on the belief that your word was your bond, and that bond was backed by something bigger than a quarterly profit margin.
It really makes you think. We live in an age of 1,000-page user agreements, endless litigation, blockchain verification. We've gained a lot of speed, sure.
We have.
But I have to ask, in gaining all that security, have we lost the efficiency of a system that was built entirely on reputation? I mean, when you trust the person across the table, you don't need a lawyer to verify the handshake.
And that's the most efficient transaction of all.
Something to think about next time you click I agree on a form you didn't read. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
My pleasure.
We'll catch you on the next one.